Hello, my friend, and welcome to the study. Some of the videos that I'm working on now, including one that came out quite recently, and my video of Pliny's letter to Tacitus, have incorporated some form of letter writing. So I thought that I would show you some of the design and production behind 18th century correspondence and letter writing in general that interested me to make some videos for you. Then I will write some letters in 17th century style, seal and lock them, one to you and one to another YouTube creator. Sealing letters had become a fine art by the 18th century, and my own interest in this practice began with news about a new imaging project that makes ancient texts readable. We begin in the Villa dei Papiri in Herculaneum, or Herculano, when Mount Vesuvius erupted in AD 79. The famous city of Pompeii was buried in ash. Also buried were a number of smaller villages and towns, including some very luxurious villas in the countryside surrounding Vesuvius. In the late 18th century, the town of Herculaneum was excavated, and a collection of approximately 1,100 papyrus scrolls made from pressed plants was found. These scrolls belonged to a library in a home believed to belong to the family of Julius Caesar's father-in-law, Lucius Calpurnius Piso Caesoninus. And it produced the only large-scale library to have survived from Greco-Roman antiquity, and the only classical library to have been found in situ in the world. These papyrus scrolls were stored in bundles and were charred by the hot ash that fell. They were found quite misshapen and completely impossible to unroll or read. Over the many years, several efforts were made to unroll these scrolls, with disastrous results. In the 19th century, a collection at Oxford tried a machine unrolling method, which produced many bits of the scroll, some of it entirely illegible. X-ray imaging wasn't possible because of the carbon black ink that had been used and the carbon of the scrolls as it had charred. So as the years went by, many hoped that a method would come available so that we might find out what wonderful texts lay buried in the ash in the library at Herculaneum. Would it be histories, chronicles, of which we only have pieces? Would it be long-lost texts by Sappho or Epicurus? Everyone waited, and in the 21st century, a project using micro-CT scanning began working on the scrolls from Herculaneum to virtually unroll and scan the script on these very misshapen and charred tomes from the library at the Villa dei Papiri. Then, the Sound and Vision Museum in The Hague in the Netherlands announced a postmaster's trunk full of 300-year-old undelivered letters placed in the Brienne collection, including 577 unopened, locked letters. Using imaging, Queen Mary University of London sponsored a project that employed X-ray microtomography and computer-generated programming to virtually unfold and read these letters without opening them and breaking the locks and the seals that had been on them. Ever since rules and laws were made to prevent the post being intercepted and opened, rulers were trying to find ways to break them. Governments would intercept letters, and they were brought back to chambres noires, or black chambers, which resembled spy laboratories. Steam was often used to soften the wax seals. Expert spies could take impressions of the seals with a soft medium to make new ones in case the originals were broken. And then hot wires would be slid under the seals to open the letters. Specialists could also slide thin batons with a very long slit into the envelopes and twirl the letters around them so they could be extracted without breaking the seals. Austria's black chamber had the reputation of being very efficient. Sacks of diplomatic mail would arrive at 7 a.m. The letters were unsealed and read. Important information was copied. And then the letters were replaced, resealed, and arrived at the embassies by 9:30. It is said that when a British ambassador in Austria complained that he was getting copies instead of originals of his post, Prime Minister Metternich replied, "How clumsy my people are becoming." The public knew about letters being opened and took measures to ensure that not only would their missives be difficult to open, but it would also be easy to tell if someone had tried. For our letter, let's look at some writing materials that we will need. Paper, of course. The Romans, for writing their scrolls or some letters, would use papyrus, which was made from the pith of a plant. In the Middle Ages, vellum or parchment was used. This was a membrane or animal skin that was stretched and treated and scraped. Papermaking with wood and cloth pulp reached northern Europe about the end of the 14th century. And today we're going to be using some cotton and wood pulp calligraphic paper, which is very nice. It's a very nice surface for writing. Pounce was also often used from ground cuttlefish bone. It was used to smooth the writing surface of rough paper and also to dry the ink after writing. This would have been put in a pounce pot that resembles something like a giant salt shaker. And to conserve the pounce, the top would be concave so that the pounce would fall back into the shaker. I don't have any pounce, nor do I have a pounce pot, but I do have a packet of pounce, and you can see it's white and makes an anti-static surface, and it fills in the little lines on my fingers. So it's very fine, sandy, and this would have been shaken onto the paper either before or after writing and then blown off or shaken off like that. We will also need some ink. Earlier ink was often made with soot or lamp black, suspended in a solution of Arabic or glue-like substance. Later, it was more common for black ink to be made from oak gall. This was extracted from a nut-like pod formed when larvae submit substances into the leaves of an oak or other trees. Today, we're going to be using this sepia calligraphic ink. Let's look at pens. The Romans used metal or reed pens that they dipped in ink for permanent missives. Later in the 6th century, quills were used. Feathers were selected from one of the first 5 flight feathers of a large bird, such as a goose, swan, or peacock. It was said that feathers from the left wing were best for right-handed writers, and feathers from the right wing were better for left-handed writers, because you can see the curve. And these are quite big quills as well. So you can see how big the diameter is. The feather is soaked in hot water until it's soft, and then the membrane is scraped off. with a sharp knife. And that is my craft knife. Pen knives were very common, part of the writer's desk and implements. Then a diagonal cut was made into the quill so that the barrel had the right shape, and the quick was pulled out. Sometimes you can insert rolls of paper to hold more ink, but that's kind of a personal preference, and that's me trying to make the quill work a little bit better. And the quill can also be hardened then by pushing it into hot sand before the nib is cut and shaped. Later, in the 19th century, steel nibs were able to be made much better than before, and they began to be used over quills. And of course, in the 20th century, pens that could hold ink, that didn't have to be dipped, were used. And this one has most of the nib under this little pointed plastic section. This one is an old Parker 5T special. And you can see it's very Art Deco style. And this is where Parker get their very famous arrow symbol. And now, of course, we have ballpoint pens. So you can see with oak gall and waterfowl and different implements that we use, how humans have always had a kind of interdependency with nature, which I think means we should take care of it. Some other things that we will be using today are an ink blotter. This is some blotting paper. It's very thick and soaks up ink. A rocking ink blotter is quite nice to use. It's got a convex sort of shape, and you've probably seen them with a handle on it, and you can rock it across your page. I don't have one yet. Hopefully I will be able to purchase one at some point. The ones I've seen are, at the moment, I'm unable to justify the expense, so I'm just using normal blotting paper for now. We will also be using some sealing wax. You can see I've used this one, and this one you can actually light. So this is melted in a candle and then pushed onto the paper before it's stamped. And the same with this one. This one has a very pretty design. But as I tend to be a bit sloppy with these things, and I've set the paper on fire a couple times, I'm going to use this wax melting set with some little wax beads that go in there and melt in the heat, so it's not as messy and prevents you setting the paper on fire if you're so inclined. We also have our seals, of course, wax seals. This one I quite like. It has a sailboat on it. It's one of my favorite. Another tool that was used often was a bone, a piece of bone. You can use this to fold paper, to shape paper as you're folding it, poke holes in paper, that kind of thing. This one, of course, is not bone. It's made out of hardened plastic, so it's part of an art set. We'll use our craft knife, a pair of scissors, and an awl to poke holes in paper. Also be using some thread, so I've picked out some nice embroidery thread to seal the letters, because the sealing and locking of a letter is very personal and ensures the security for the person to whom it's being sent. It can also be quite beautiful if it's done nicely. So it's a very nice touch that we can see in many paintings, but also in the Pokemon Twilight Wings series. And last but not least, what I'm going to be using is some kitchen roll or paper towels to soak up any extra ink that the blotter doesn't get first. So let's write and seal some letters. I normally would have had a cloth, a big handkerchief, if I were an 18th century or 17th century letter writer. But I'm going to use kitchen roll paper towel. And I'm going to select a pen. Open my ink. Oh, that's a nice sound. I like the lid sounds. All right. So this letter is going to be to you. To make sure I have it right. And this beautiful sepia ink. There we go. So we are in the study. And I'm not going to write a year because it could be any time, couldn't it? All right. Dear my friend. I am writing to you at the beginning of the northern summer. To let you know that I am. See how nice it is to write letters like this, because you can take the time to compose your thoughts and really make it personal for the person you're writing to. That I am thinking about you. It pleases me to tell you that all is well here in the study. It's a bit scratchy. I wish it looked better, but there you go. Let's put a comma there. With many books, to occupy the intellect and what do we have here in the study? Stories. Aha. To inspire the imagination. Thank you for coming spend some time with me here. It is always great to see you just as you are. I would like to let you know bit of puppy fur, can't be helped. I would like to let you know what people are saying about you. You are a beautiful person. You are a great friend. You are kind. You are inspiring. And you are fun to be with. That's right. People are saying these things about you, even if you don't know it. So it's good to be reminded. Wishing you a peaceful and happy day. Oh, I really need to work on my Spencerian handwriting. That would look much nicer with this quill. From Secret scholar. There. So that is my letter to you. We're going to blot it. Could use our pounce, but I'm going to use the blotting paper just to clear up anything that would smear when we seal it. And that way it doesn't smear when you blot it either. Let's seal this, and I'm going to lock it with a kind of lock that was pretty common in the 15th, 16th, 17th century, called a spiral lock. And I'll explain this to you as we make this. What happens with most letter locks is a strip of the paper is cut. It can either be cut clean out of the paper and used, or it can still be attached to the paper. Now for this, I'm actually going to put my ink away so I don't spill. And I'm going to get a craft board so I don't cut through the table. This doesn't look very pretty, but at least I'm not going to make some new indentations on the wood. This particular spiral is from a French letter that was found at the Musée de la Poste in the Vivarais collection, sent in 1639. I'm going to use the awl here to make a slight hole and mark where I want this sword shaped cut in the letter to be. And you can see it tapers. So I'm going to try and do a good job with that without cutting my fingers. We want to go all the way through the paper here. And there we have our sword of paper. Get our folding tool there. letter. And there's the sword that we're going to make a spiral with. A spiral were these darts or swords that would go through the letter, in and around. Again, sometimes attached to the letter and sometimes completely detached and putting a piece of paper through the letter. If it would go around and around, it was called a spiral. This one's particularly pretty, so this is the way I wanted to seal your letter. I'll make the first cut there quite wide. And this one actually is important that the sword has a center there. We can pull it through there in that fold, that crease in the center. Maybe I need to cut a little bit more. There we go. Alright. It's a little bit bigger. So you get a very pretty arrow shape there. And we go to the back. I'm going to cut again along that crease. Let's see, I'll make it there. Probably. There. And that's going to go through all the paper, even the sword on the other side. And I haven't stabbed myself yet. So again, we make the sword with its crease and stick it through. Okay, and so I'm going to make our diamond shape now. Like that. It's a very neat little diamond shape there. And it goes in one more time. If we can possibly manage another cut through all the paper. There it is. If I cut myself, I should be very careful not to bleed on the paper. That would be pretty rude to send a letter with stains on it. Alright. Got through most of the layers. So if you wanted to send something like this, you can see how personal it is. How much time you will have invested in making sure that it looked nice, that it was sealed properly. So it's a lot of show of respect as well. And there's the small diamond shape there. This one can get bent or cut, but what I'm going to do with this is seal it with some wax so that it looks pretty. So we'll light our wax candle. With the 21st century blowtorch. Now, I've got to pick a color. What color are we going to melt for your nice letter that you will be so happy to receive, and it will make your day? We have all kinds of colors here. Little wax pellets. Look at all of that. You can see all those very nice colors. There's a very beautiful blue here. Purple. Oh, this is like an indigo blue. Let's try those. And we'll mix it with another blue. So we'll use 2 indigos and 1 dark blue. And you can watch that melt in there. So we see our wax melt. Make sure it's nice and liquid. But that's one of the hard things about the wax sticks, is the wax really has to be good and hot to work with it, and with the wax stick it gets everywhere. Well, I think some people are better at it than others. I'm in the latter group, so I'm using this one, and we've got a nice marbled effect there with the indigo and the blue. Get it nice and melty, and we'll pick out my favorite sailboat. There we are. All right. The marble there, going the blue around. There we go. And there's our sailboat. Very nicely done. And there is our letter with the French spiral lock. Beautiful swirly blue indigo seal with a sailboat. There you are. Let's write a letter to another ASMR creator. Someone whose channel I've been following for a while, and he does historical videos and very relaxing, informative videos. It's NathanASMR, and there should be a link to his channel there. So do check out his channel. He's got some beautiful, beautiful camera footage and very relaxing gameplay videos as well. So for NathanASMR, I'm going to be locking this letter in a special way to prevent spies. So we're going to be using half of this A3 sheet of calligraphic paper. So we start from the study. And we'll go, dear, NathanASMR. I always think it's nice to have a proper salutation, even with an email, because it shows that you have some respect and for the person to whom you're writing, and some personal investment in your message. But you're not just writing to some obscure number, but to a person. So, I see you have succeeded in opening this missive. Because it's going to be quite a difficult letter lock. And a very difficult one to get open if you're not the intended recipient. And I hope this finds you well. As I write, spring turns to summer in the British Isles, and one can see the full glory of the English countryside. But NathanASMR's videos are of his region. He's got some beautiful history videos of his area and some relaxing environmental videos and history videos. So I will say, but I think of your white sand beaches, turquoise water, subtropical birds, and trade winds. Yeah. And I know you are surrounded by plenty of splendor, and history, which is very inspirational. So I've finished my letter to NathanASMR, telling him of something that I think he'll find quite interesting. And I'll sign it, your friend, secret scholar. Or I could sign this pattern that I've seen in several 18th century letters, including Mozart's, and I haven't found out anything specific about it. I think some of it might have to do with Freemasonry, and definitely an Age of Enlightenment type thing where they put their initials or the year. I'm going to put the year here. So we have MMXX 2020, and I'm going to put the 1 right through the middle. So I'm not sure what this is doing, but I still have to find out some more information about this sort of signature. It's a very interesting way of signing. So there we have the letter to another ASMR creator, one with whom I've collaborated on the Renaissance videos, and he did a really bang-up job with Walter Raleigh in his videos. So if you haven't seen the Renaissance ASMR project, that's a good one to check out. You can see it in a playlist on my channel, as well as NathanASMR and the French Whisperer, and there are about 6 videos in that series. So this one I'm going to fold according to a letter that was found in the National Archives at Kew Gardens in England, written by a certain Simeon Fox in 1601. Now, this man was living in Venice and somehow was asked to supply intelligence or just his observances to someone in England, which he did, and it must have been very secretive or valuable information because his letters were sealed or locked in this way so that no one could open them, and if they did, it would be plainly obvious that the letter had been tampered with. So I'm going to make this one. It's called the Dagger Trap, and we'll see if NathanASMR can open it. So instead of a spiral lock, it's going to be more like a dagger because it's going to be a short sword, or maybe a rapier or something like that. This one gets folded into thirds, so it's a lot of layers to this one. Let's see if I can do a nice third there. Probably much easier working with cloth paper, so cotton pulp paper with this sort of letter. And that is a type of paper I'm sure that Mr. Fox had no trouble procuring in a place like Venice. Italian paper making was very, very luxurious and still is to this day. They make some really nice papers. So I'm going to make sure that's nice and creased. And that is the size of the packet that NathanASMR is going to receive. So I'm going to make my dagger on this side. Make some holes here. And we'll unfold that so that I can make these cuts. Probably best to use a straight edge because I want to make sure I make a straight line. It's still quite difficult. And I'll go to there, I think. There we go. Just a little bit longer there. Okay. Now to make another make a slit where the dagger is going to go. I'll put it about here. Two little parallel slits so that it can go right through there. Okay. I'm going to fold the letter up again in quarters. And in thirds. Okay, this is where I'm going to use the awl because this dagger is going to come through these layers. So I'm going to try and make sure I can get it through there. And this one, the dagger goes through this. Try to make it nice and neat. There. So we're lacing that dagger through these layers of paper and locking it like that. So we're going to put a wax seal there on the inside to make sure that lock doesn't get opened. Now, I think we'll use some turquoise and blue for the water in South Beach, where NathanASMR has done his filming. Okay, well, that's getting nice and melty. The swirly, the blue, and the turquoise there. And I'll get my sailboat, very appropriate for beaches and ocean. And we'll set the dagger trap. Okay. It's like watching the One Ring melt in the magma or the lava coming out of the volcano at Mount Doom. Oh, yeah. A swirly blue and turquoise seal. And we'll put the sailboat there. There's our turquoise sailboat, and that's the dagger and its trap. Now comes the tricky part. I think I might have made that cut too close to the wax seal, so I'm going to move it a little bit farther on. There we go. Probably best to make it after you have an eye for where it's going. And this is the tricky bit. This dagger goes up inside and through this slit, and the letter wants to open, so it's hard to close it there, and that is springing the dagger trap. There we go. So what happens to that dagger now is it's going to come back up through these layers. So I'm going to cut there. Okay. And lace it back through there. This is the part where I have to be really careful because I always end up unlacing it while I'm working with the letter. Pushing it through. Come on. There we go, the postman's coming. I want to get the letter out in today's post. Okay. You can see our dagger now. So there is your trap. Let's seal it I'm going to seal it with thread. I'm going to poke with an awl the hole all the way through. So it's going through the dagger twice and the entire letter. So that I can get my needle and thread through it. So I'm going to use some embroidery thread. Sometimes silk cord was used, or some kind of waxed floss. But I like the look of the embroidery thread. And again, I've picked out turquoise for NathanASMR's video of South Beach because I really liked that one. I love the water there. So I'm going to sew this through. And if you've seen, which I've already mentioned, Pokemon, Twilight Wings, you can see they've sealed their letters very similarly. I doubt they've used a dagger trap, but they've used wax seals and cord or thread to make it look pretty. Sometimes you could use ribbon as well. I'm going to tie a knot in the end of this just in case something untoward happens. That way I won't have to thread it back through, and then I can always cut or untie the knot when I'm ready. So I'm going to put my thumb there, and I'm going to come around and back through several times. And I might need a thimble to push that. There we go. And I want a sort of a three-way. Forget the thimble, I'll just use the cutty board. I'm getting a three-way ribbon going so that it's impossible to open this letter without being found out. So if you were a government spy or someone with untoward intentions, and you opened this letter and sprung the dagger trap, you would probably have to keep the information and not deliver it, or say that it wasn't delivered because it was too late. You would have sprung the trap, and the recipient would know that it had been opened and read. The last one here, and then we have a three-way ribbon, and I'm going to put it like that, and one more time, and then I've got a nice tail. And this time I'm going to use more wax. Ouch, that's hot. What colors shall I use? I'm going to use something contrasting. There's still a little bit of blue in there, but I think I'm going to use some gold. Gold is very nice, and bronze. Yes, a beautiful bronzy color. I like that, contrasting with the pretty turquoise. You can see the colors there as they melt. And we're still getting a little bit of blue turquoise residue, so it's going to be a very rainbowy wax seal. At different times, during the Enlightenment, during the Victorian era, there were different traditions and different meanings attached to what color wax you used. Black wax for letters of sympathy, funeral announcements, that sorts of thing, whether it was a love letter. Also, letters were also sealed with wafers, which were a mixture of flour and water that made a kind of a glue paste. And at some point, wafers were considered uncouth and disrespectful, but that was probably later when more people could afford wax. So in the 16th, 17th centuries, wafers were used by people who couldn't afford or didn't want to spend on wax. So here we've got our swirly. Look at that. So I'm going to use a nice big swirly rainbow gold and turquoise seal. Look at that. What beautiful colors. I do love colors. Okay. And with the wax, it's not like paint, where if you mix too many yucky colors, you get a mess. The wax makes a swirly pattern, so the colors separate. Will I blow on it, make it cool a little bit? There we are. A little bit of wax residue, and that is our letter. Look at that. Isn't that beautiful? Just like Pokemon. Or some of the spies. So what I have to do is address this then. I'll make sure it looks nice. I'm going to write NathanASMR. Always clean the pen nib as much as you can. Take care of our pens. And there we have our letters. So thank you for spending this time with me, learning about letters and seeing these written. I hope you enjoyed your letter and this video. And I look forward to making many more videos with letters. So in the meantime, be good to yourself, be kind to others, and be extraordinary.